Time for a good stretch, Brian. Segment 3, Gold and Black Live.
Tired.
Well, it's been one of those days already, but Tom Dienhart joins us for our third and final segment. I want to thank our sponsors, Triple X on the Hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929, Hilton Garden Inn, and of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson and the good folks at WLFI too for joining us and helping us get this done. Mike Babinski, we just finished a couple segments with Mike, and Tom, you were able to listen in as well. I'll start with you, Tom. Impressions. He's got a pretty good command of what he's up against, it seems. Takes kind of a practical approach to things.
Yeah, he covered a lot of ground there. I guess I'm intrigued most by the NCAA basketball events that are going to be taking place in Mackey Arena. Sounds like the NCAA just released information they're going to allow up to 25% capacity at these venues for the big dance, which is encouraging. And just a great opportunity for Purdue from a public relations standpoint to be one of those venues nationwide. Again, a great opportunity to get the word out even more about Purdue and really how much basketball matters. I mean, not that we didn't already know that, but again, just to send that message again nationally and how much basketball matters in the state and in a school like Purdue University, show Mackey Arena as well. So a great opportunity again for the university to host that. Be one of the hosts for that NCAA tournament coming up here in March.
Yeah, Brian, you look at that, and that's news. It was news on the 25% part of things. You've been going to games there where it's been empty all along, but even Mike talked about it is a plum for the state of Indiana that those venues are part of this. It can't hurt Purdue's profile as well in terms of being obviously the Boilermakers will not likely be playing in its home venue, I wouldn't think. But it certainly is a positive when you look at the brand that is Purdue basketball.
Yeah, they're not going to have their motion peer or anything like that on the floor or anything like that on national television. But people will say West Lafayette, Indiana. People will say, Purdue University. It'll make West Lafayette, sound like a really important place. I'm not saying it's not, but it's also not New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles by any means. And it is something to us, at least in some small way, Purdue fights at times. But it'll make the state of Indiana feel like the center of the college basketball universe, and Purdue will be a big part of that. And I think that certainly is a very positive thing for Purdue, for sure.
Mike Babinski, I should say. Tom, when Mike talked about obviously the start of spring ball, you have that this afternoon. You'll be hearing. We talked to Jeff Brom. You talked to Jeff Brom and Brian as well yesterday. But start of spring ball is a storyline. Mike Babinski was, I think, honest about what needs to happen. This program needs to take a leap or take a move forward. It's been disappointing the last 2 years. I thought the interesting comment that both Brom and Babinski said is that we're close, so to speak, but we're not getting the job done by finishing. What was your take from not only what Mike Babinski said today, but also what Jeff Brom said yesterday about what needs to be done to right the ship and get it headed back in the direction that we saw maybe in the first 2 years under Brom?
Well, I think they hope they've addressed those things in the off season. I guess time will tell, right? Brom really shook up the defensive staff. We all are familiar with the storyline there. The 3 new assistants, the new coordinator, and Brad Lambert. Jeff provided some information yesterday. It's a staff with these additions that has even more of a veteran's bent to it. Mike talked about that today as well. The coordinator experience, the head coaching experience of these new assistants, Mark Haig and Ron English and Brad Lambert. I mean, you can't underscore, again, the value of all that knowledge they're going to be bringing to the table to a defense that we all know needs to make a leap in improvement here. As far as the scheme goes, from what I'm told, expect the base front to be a 4-man front. Jeff understands the need to accentuate the talents of George Karlaftis and also DeMarcus Mitchell. Don't be shocked if DeMarcus Mitchell maybe even plays defensive end. He's the guy that they're going to try to move around, but if they think he can make more plays at end, I think that's where you're going to see DeMarcus Mitchell. So long story short, there is some talent to work with on that side of the ball too. So As you said, Alan, the day the process begins, 15 practices, 3 scrimmages. Spring drills will end on March 19th. No spring game, but again, a great opportunity for Purdue to begin evaluating its talent and trying to put some pieces in place for a real big and key 2021 season.
28 days, 15 practices, an important time. I think Mike really talked about the need. You know, Jeff Brom, this is kind of a new experience. So it's been kind of my feeling that he's a guy that's used to being a winner. He's been a winner about it, especially as a player at Louisville. He's been a part of some losing programs as an assistant coach, but this has been a little bit new experience. I thought it was interesting that Mike Babinski talked about kind of their relationship between Babinski and Jeff Brom in terms of how much they talk, and that Brom is is a guy that's hell-bent on improvement and trying to figure out ways and trying to listen to solutions to the problem.
Yeah. One thing, people have to understand about Jeff Brom, he's not been a head coach very long. I mean, he's still, he's younger as a coach than he is as an actual person, because obviously a large percentage of his football career was playing. So he didn't get into coaching until later on. But these are important moments for the development of coaches. You learn from adversity every bit as much as you learn from success. And I thought, one thing that Mike Babinski talked about that I think is important is that he's always willing to listen. He seems like he's got some self-awareness to him. Seems like he has some reflective ability, so to speak, about him to understand, hey, something's not working right now. We have to go fix it. I mean, obviously the results are what they are. Right. So it's not exactly thinking outside the box to recognize that the record wasn't good enough, but it doesn't sound like he's pointing fingers at everybody else and thinking, he has all the answers, when obviously I don't know if anybody has all the answers. And I think one of the interesting parts about this season is going to be, he does have some head coaches around him now on his staff. I know he has before, but he's got a couple of former head coaches on his staff. He's got a lot of guys with coordinator experience. He's got a lot of experience in general. And when he came with his first staff at Purdue, there wasn't, an unbelievable amount of experience on that staff, and how he leverages the answers other people might have on top of the answers where maybe in the past he thought he had, before. I think that's going to be an important part of this season. I think that's going to be an important part of Jeff Brom's growth as a coach. And, as I said before, he is still growing. I mean, he is now where like Matt Painter probably was in like 2000 or probably 2012 or something like that. I mean, he's still, a relatively young coach, and this is part of the, this is going to be part of the process for him, seeing, where his career ultimately takes him.
Yeah, going to be an interesting storyline to watch from that standpoint. I know the media schedule just came out, and you're going to have an opportunity, Tom. As a reporter, this is not hog heaven for you, because you're not going to be able to go to practice. You're going to be left relegated to Zoom, being able to talk to players, Brian Brom and assistant coach Brian Brom, I guess it is today, and some of the quarterbacks. How do you do? What's the storyline from your perspective, and how do you try to get information as you move forward that will keep not only yourself interested, but keeping that fan base interested as we move through spring ball?
Well, ask questions, and quarterback spot. It's a little has one interesting storyline this spring. Jeff talked about Aiden O'Connell and his availability. Of course, Aiden hurt his foot last year. He was the starter as the season began, started the first 3 games, 2 of which Purdue won, the only 2 wins of the season. And Aiden was lost, and Jack Plummer had to finish the season. Aiden O'Connell underwent surgery, and he's going to be limited this spring. He's not going to be full go. So a lot of reps for Plummer. We'll also get an extended look, it sounds like, at Micah Lamo, who is a true freshman. And then, of course, the UCLA transfer Austin Burton as well. So a chance for those guys maybe to get, like I said, an extended audition. Of course, last year, it was the reverse, right? Jack Plummer was the one coming off an injury, an ankle injury. He was limited in the spring, and that gave Aiden O'Connell a chance to get a lot of reps. And again, he's the guy who ended up winning the job coming in the 2020 season. So it's going to be fun to watch these guys battle and see who emerges. I don't think we'll get any answer this spring, obviously, but quarterback is always a big storyline, always a lot of interest in that spot, especially at a school like Purdue.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. Brian, as we put a close on the show, obviously a big game for Purdue men's basketball tomorrow, 5:30 against Nebraska. It is a place that Purdue did not play well last year, and I understand Nebraska is almost a completely different team, and so in some ways, many ways, so is Purdue. A big win over Michigan State, maybe not a lot of style points, but when you beat Tom Izzo 4 times in a row, that's never a bad thing. Give us your pocket evaluation, just to, not only the importance of this week, but, they also Purdue's got a little bit of downtime, at least as it stands right now, because they play Nebraska, then they don't play again for 6 days before they play Penn State next Friday. So tell us, kind of what you see there.
Yeah, I mean, I still think, obviously, Purdue's in a great spot here. You're better than Michigan State, so that was a game that I thought Purdue should have won, and obviously did. You're better than Nebraska. You should win that game. I think this is a more mature team this year than it was last year. And think about that for a second when you consider how many freshmen Purdue's playing right now, what I just said about last year's team. So I think that games like Nebraska and whatnot, you don't worry about as much. Obviously anything can happen. Nebraska's playing better now than they were a while back, but they're just so undisciplined and they're just so limited that, I keep waiting for Purdue to have that game where they just stink, where they show up and they look like a bunch of freshmen and they just stink. And older teams have had those games. Purdue's not had that game. They've had halves. A lot of those halves were 2 months ago, but Purdue's in a good spot right now. Purdue's been steady. Purdue's been relatively consistent. They've been competitive everywhere they've been. And I think they have a chance to get better because I think, Sasha Stefanovic is one thing. Eventually he'll presumably be back to what he was, but Jaden Ivey's getting better. Mason Gillis is getting better. Zach Edey's getting better. I thought Brandon Newman took a huge step defensively against Michigan State when he's not scoring and he still impacts the game defensively. I think that's a big step for him. You're going to have opportunities to practice here with so many days between games. Your schedule is set up for success. You have Wisconsin coming in. That looks like a tough game on paper. I think Purdue's better than Wisconsin. You go to Penn State. That's not an easy game by any means. Penn State just lost to Nebraska. I think Purdue's better than Penn State. Doesn't mean they'll win both those games, but I think they're set up well to win those kind of games. Matt Painter made an interesting comment last week about how the important part is that Purdue's real good here in a couple weeks, meaning at the start of March. And I think he's not saying the games in between aren't important, but he just means that he thinks his team has an opportunity to build into something even more than it's been. And what it's been so far has been pretty successful. So I think there's still a lot of room for Purdue to grow here even. And that's that has to be considered a pretty exciting thing for Purdue here the final few weeks.
Yeah, going to be a storyline we'll be watching not only on our next Golden Black Live, but obviously on the site each week, each day as well. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed the show. I want to thank also Mike Babinski for his joining us really for 2 segments. We appreciate that as well. And I want to thank our sponsors, of course, XXX, Hilton Garden Inn, State Farm agent Trent Johnson. Thank to the folks at Gordon Jackson and the folks at WLFI for making this happen. And we will look forward to next Friday. We'll be previewing Purdue Penn State road game next Friday at this time. We'll look forward to doing that and having more of the same on Golden Black Live. So